The night Dina gave birth to her daughter at Salem City General Hospital, everything seemed like a blur. The pain from the surgery still lingered, but it didn't matter. She just brought a new life into the world, and that was all that mattered. As she looked down at the tiny bundle in her arms, a wave of love and relief washed over her. "Thank goodness, dear, you were born safely," Dina whispered, stroking her newborn's soft skin. Despite the pain from her stitches, her heart felt light. The hospital room was oddly quiet, almost too quiet. There was no buzz of activity, no chatter from the staff, just an eerie calm. Nurses came and went, but Dina couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Hours passed, and finally, Dina was told she could go home. She cradled her daughter, still groggy from anesthesia, and walked out. The hallway was dim, with flickering lights. It felt like a maze. The silence oppressive. Even the staff she passed seemed detached, avoiding eye contact. Outside, the streets of Salem were strangely empty. Dina tried to hail a taxi, but none came. The usually busy streets were eerily still. No cars, no pedestrians, just an unsettling quiet. A man from a nearby store approached her as she waited for a taxi. "Excuse me, miss," he asked, his face serious. "Where did you just come from?" Dina blinked, confused. "The hospital. I just had a baby at Salem City General," she replied, her voice shaky from the surreal nature of the evening. The man's eyes widened. "What do you mean, Salem City General?" His face turned pale. "That hospital's been shut down for years. Some parts have even been demolished." Dina stared at him, trying to process. She had just come from there. "No, you're mistaken," she said. "I just came from there." The man shook his head. "Salem City General hasn't been operational for a long time. It's been replaced by the provincial hospital." Dina felt a knot in her stomach. She thanked him, but dread settled in her chest. Something wasn't right. There was no way she had imagined it. She had seen the staff, the rooms. It was real. Her heart pounded as she walked back toward the hospital. When she reached the area where the hospital should have been, her breath caught. The building was gone. All that remained was an empty lot, surrounded by construction fences. The rice stalls she used to pass were gone too. The area was deserted. She stood frozen, trying to comprehend what she was seeing. How could this be? She had just walked out of there, but the street was empty. No one was around. No signs of life, just the vacant lot. Dina's hands shook as she held her daughter. A cold fear settled in her chest. If the hospital wasn't there, then where had she been? Suddenly Dina heard something. A faint cry. It was distant at first, but unmistakable. A baby's cry. Her breath caught as she looked down at her daughter, still sleeping soundly. The cry grew louder, closer, but it wasn't her baby's cry. It was something else, something wrong. Dina spun around, her heart racing. But when she looked behind her, there was no one there. The darkness of the empty street stretched before her. The cry continued echoing, and Dina's footsteps quickened as she walked down the street, desperate to escape the feeling that had settled over her. Her thoughts were a blur, but the more she walked, the more the air pressed down on her. The crying followed her, growing closer with every step. She reached her apartment breathless, but even as she closed the door behind her, the cry lingered in her ears, as if it were trapped in the walls. As she looked at her daughter, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that something had followed them home. Days passed and Dina couldn't stop thinking about the hospital and the strange events. No one remembered the hospital the way she did. Everyone said it had been closed for years. But Dina knew what she had seen. She had been there. The memories blurred, fading into a fog. Dina couldn't clear. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the cry. The cry of a child, but not her child. Something else. Something that wasn't meant to be. As the days turned into weeks, Dina began questioning her sanity. Had she imagined things? Had the anesthesia affected her mind? Or had she stepped into a world that wasn't quite real? She didn't know. But one thing was certain. The cry had never stopped. It followed her, echoing in her thoughts. No matter how hard she tried to escape it, and no matter how much she wanted to forget, the cry of the child lingered. In the stillness of the night, when the world was quiet, Dina could hear it. The cry of a child. A cry that was never meant to be.